ancestral healer and advisor to Nicholas II. They shot him, they poisoned him, they stabbed him. Finally, they had to push him under the ice of a river to kill him. Rasputin was tough. The number of soldiers killed or wounded in World War I was about 30 million, actually about 37 million, but let's call it 30 million for purposes of the test. Austria-Hungary's ultimatum to Serbia was triggered by the assassination of Archduke Francis Ferdinand and his fat wife Sofia. I don't know if she was that fat or close, but they looked fat. Disagreeing with Woodrow Wilson after the war, France demanded that any peace settlement must include the payment of reparations. France was bankrupted by the war, and they thought that money would help. It did not. At the beginning of the war, Italy remained neutral rather than side for Germany and Austria-Hungary. Bringing Russia back into the war against the Central Powers was one objective of the Allied support for the Whites and was the reason for the invasion of Russia by forces of the United States, Great Britain, and France, all of whom sent troops into Russia. The failure of the Schieffelin Plan was made apparent by the German defeat at the Battle of the Marne. Field Marshal Joffre stopped them cold by a counterattack that was both gutsy and brilliant. After the war settled into a stalemate, countries tried to maintain citizens' morale by spreading propaganda. In many cases, the propaganda was lies. Prior to World War I, there were the Balkan Wars of 1912-1913. Serbia was unhappy about the result of these wars. She wanted to lead Greater Serbia, which included areas under the control of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. It was this that was the powder keg called the Balkans. German authorities helped Lenin return to Russia because they hoped he would promote Russia's withdrawal from World War I. He did precisely that. And it was probably the communists in Russia after the war that allowed the defeat of Hitler, sopping up almost 200 German divisions. The convoy system helped the Allies counteract the German U-boat campaign in World War I and World War II. Strangely enough, even after the salutary effect of convoys was noted in World War I, they had to relearn it in World War II the same way. Sunken ships and dead sailors. Originally, it was a spontaneous citizens' uprising that toppled the Tsar. Not the communists, not the Bolsheviks, not the Mensheviks. Spontaneous citizens. The Treaty of Versailles resulted in German payment of reparations, the return of Alsace-Lorraine to France, and Germany's loss of all of its overseas possessions. The last major factor in the decision of the United States to enter the war was the sinking of the Lusitania. However, the Zimmerman telegram was also powerful. Despite receiving a conciliatory reply to its ultimatum, Austria-Hungary declared war during August 1914 against Serbia, precipitating the beginning of the First World War. After the war, Armenian civilians were the victims of mass killings conducted by the Ottoman Turks. It was the world's first example of genocide, and the world did nothing. The United States, France, and Great Britain were generally satisfied with the World War I peace terms. Of the major Allied powers, only Italy was displeased. In England, the Petition of Right was presented to the Stuart kings. It included the idea that the king was forbidden to collect taxes without the consent of Parliament. and was the beginning of parliamentary supremacy over the king. Charlie I was beheaded at the order of the army at the conclusion of the Civil War in England. Oliver Cromwell became Lord Protector and military dictator of England. They kept the parliament going for a while, and then he got rid of that too. The Glorious Revolution was caused when William and Mary came over from Holland. It was brought about by the king ignoring Parliament's religious laws, the united opposition of the Whigs and the Tories, and the king had a son, an heir, being raised as a Catholic, and while they could tolerate the king being Catholic, 2 in a row was apparently too much. The English Bill of Rights primarily provided for the right to trial by a jury of your peers. British cabinet in modern times is made up of members of the House of Commons. The Intolerable Acts were imposed, closing Boston Harbor after the Boston Tea Party. The British wanted to be paid for their tea. Tea had been, because of a tax on it, not prohibited in America, but very greatly reduced consumption of it. The British hoped to increase consumption by selling British East India tea at a very low price. Therefore, they taxed that tea low and all other tea high, making it favorable, and that created the Boston Tea Party. The Battle of Dien Bien Phu was fought between France and the Viet Minh in Vietnam. Dien Bien Phu was the turning point for the French. They got out. The turning point in the Vietnam War for the United States was the 1968 Tet Offensive. 68 Tet, United States. Dien Bien Phu, France. The man credited with the most influence on the Reformation was Martin Luther. The peasants originally believed that Luther was their ally. They were mistaken. Luther was a believer in the status quo politically. It was only in religion that he was a reformer. When he nailed the 95 Thesis to the door, Luther was a monk and a professor. He believed that the freedom of Christianity was found in an inner release from guilt and anxiety, not from free will. Completely different theological idea. Many of his ideas are found in some part in the writings of St. Augustine. Luther's ideas spread to England, France, and even to a limited extent, Spain. A precondition of the Swiss Reformation was a growth of national sentiment, occasioned in part by rejection of foreign mercenary service. They were tired of seeing their sons leave and come back in green bags, or the medieval equivalent of that. Second precondition for the Swiss Reformation was, of course, a desire for church reform. The loose Swiss confederacies were known as cantons. Erasmus strongly influenced Zwingli, and Zwingli, from his own personal experience, criticized mercenary service. His first act as a reformer was to create a Vulgate Bible, or a Bible in the common tongue. His simple and effective reform guideline was, if it could be proved from Scripture, it was true. If it could not, it was neither believed nor practiced. Zwingli and Luther met at a castle in Marburg in an attempt to thrash out their theological differences. They were unsuccessful. They did not like each other. They did not believe in each other. There were two major battles in the Swiss Civil War. They were both fought at Catel. One of them ended Zwingli's attempt to create a theocracy on earth. The Anabaptists believed in baptism as an adult only. And John Calvin founded the Calvinist religion, which, because of his theological writings, was far more influential than its size. When Calvin went to Geneva, before a year had passed, he drew up articles of governance for an entirely new church. He was a reformer, and in contrast to Luther, he wanted a new church. He did not want the Catholic Church reformed. The nationalist that shot and killed Archduke Franz Ferdinand was Serbian. And actually, his gun and training were provided by the Serbian Secret Service. He was a member of the Black Hand conspiracy. The Archduke was not popular in Austria. Austria-Hungary was called the dual monarchy, and it became that when the Habsburg family became king of both Hungary and Austria. Austria-Hungary needed the support of Germany in case of war. Therefore, they waited until they got a blank check from Germany. Germany reacted to the murder of the Archduke, as did almost all of Europe, except Serbia, with simple outrage. Russia responded to the crisis by a partial mobilization against Austria. When you take the test, 150 questions, 50 less than the midterm,